More than a year ago, I created my very first video essay, and it actually was pretty well acclaimed. This was the video that essentially changed the direction of my channel moving forward. I've seen a fair bit of success and even joy from following and expanding on this direction. I rewatched my Rise and Fall of inFAMOUS video, and let me just say it didn't age too well. Like, looking back on it now, that is a rough video. Following that video was the Modern FPS Campaigns video, which saw a massive improvement in quality, writing, and even my voice. I sounded like a child in the inFAMOUS video. The next video, I sound like a man. Not really, but you get the point. So to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of that video that started it all for this channel, I'll be remaking that inFAMOUS video with much improved writing, voiceover work, and of course, editing. And of course, like that video, all DLCs will be excluded, meaning no Festival of Blood or First Light. So let's go. Also spoilers. inFAMOUS is an open world superhero franchise that has personally stuck with me as the best of its kind. Not only did I grow up on these games, but this was a fairly successful series of games, as well as Sucker Punch Productions taking a step back from the Sly Cooper trilogy. Around the time the infamous PS3, see what I did there, was sold to the public, the folks at Sucker Punch were working on a completely different project with gameplay, tone, and narrative they've never really experimented with before in previous games. At E3 of 2007, they announced inFAMOUS, with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. What absolute legends. Anyways, this game seemed really interesting from the trailer. A superhero game with a gritty tone and a muddy aesthetic was something that was never really done before. And who would have thought of an anti-hero with electricity as powers? Not my 4-year-old brain. Your boy was still rocking Spider-Man and repping Ben 10 back when it was good. And at last, May 26th of 2009, 3 years and 4 days after I was born, one of the greatest open world superhero sandbox games released, exclusively to the PS3, and this game was nothing short of a masterpiece. The new direction and IP that Sucker Punch was sticking behind seemed promising and warm welcoming. inFAMOUS was the open world game you should be getting on your PS3 at the time. The game was ambitious, different, and genuinely exciting. It was also well received, scoring a 9.2 from IGN, 85 from Metacritic, 9 from GameSpot, and a 7 from Eurogamer. The game was praised for its unique third-person shooter combat, unique mechanics, and the overall open world. It was flashy while still fitting the art style and tone of the game. It was surprisingly dense when it came to world building and design. Each district had its own look, personality, and character, both for aesthetics and for the sake of the narrative. Growing up, I wasn't playing GTA much, or other quote-unquote GTA clones. Instead, I was playing inFAMOUS with my dad. Looking back on it, I'm actually really glad I was playing inFAMOUS instead of GTA. inFAMOUS was just so different. While yes, it's based on the open world formula that made GTA superior, as well as the open world superhero formula that made the Spider-Man games of that time so superior, inFAMOUS mixed these two together while also doing its own thing, which is why most people consider the game to be the best in the series. Its world was engaging, its gameplay was compelling, the story was dramatic and dark, and the art style was flashy but dark. So let's analyze them, starting with the presentation. Visually, I still think the game holds up. Now yes, in-engine cutscenes do be having that old school Sly Cooper animations, but to me that adds to the overall comic book anti-hero story art style. I enjoy it very much so. But one thing people complained about when it came to the visuals was that the world just looked too muddy and was kind of ugly to look at. Now I can definitely see that and agree that the game can look a little too muddy, but ugly to look at? Come on dude, this game looks good for its age, even though Prototype was graphically much better.
I was made for this.
Let's talk gameplay though. This is one of the only superhero games that play like a third-person shooter. Other superhero games either require you to go rush your enemies or bring them to you. In inFAMOUS, you could be hanging on a cliff while shooting enemies, thanking the fact that concrete has your back. Now, although you can be campy, inFAMOUS actually encourages different ways of approaching combat. Whether you want guns blazing, fast-paced action, tactical and slightly slower play, or hide behind cover that won't last too long and play inFAMOUS like a real third-person shooter. Since you have electricity as power, you have healing sources all around you. Now, while that might sound overpowered, the thing is you die pretty quickly. So if you aren't quick enough to get to a healing source, well, that's just unlucky. One other thing that inFAMOUS did differently than other open world superhero games, or just open world games in general, is the karma system. The karma system is essentially the selling point of the game, kind of. Certain actions and choices can impact your reputation and status, meaning you either become the city's savior or its doom. You can either have a good or an evil ending. Now, say what you want about the karma system in the overall inFAMOUS franchise, as it is pretty flawed, but the first inFAMOUS to me has the best karma system in the franchise, mostly because the choices you were given made sense. In inFAMOUS 2, they were fine, but there was a few choices that were kind of pointless and served no sensible justice or impact to either good or bad karma, or even the overall plot. Second Son's karma was just so ridiculously black and white, and a majority of outcomes just felt so forced and made no sense. Second Son's choices almost feel linear in some way. Now, a few other things the karma system impacted was your powers and your character's overall look. Let's talk about traversal. Traversing the map is a big part of the game. So let me just say, the platforming and climbing in this game, although not as compelling, is pretty freaking awesome. Sewer missions showcase this even further. You see platforming and fighting at the same time. Climbing towers is fun. Zipping across power lines and train tracks is a fast way to get around the city. Accompanying you is your thrusters, which help you glide over long distances, as well as stay in the air for a while. Now, I'm not going to cover up the story or narrative too much since I've been talking about this game for a little too long, so I'll keep it short and sweet. You play as Cole McGrath, a bike messenger / courier who was sent to deliver a mysterious package which turned out to be some type of bomb called the Ray Sphere. Once going off, it kills hundreds, possibly thousands of people. Empire City is crumbling, destroying city landmarks, but a group of people with certain genetics called the Conduit gene survive the blast and gain powers, and Cole is one of them. Questioning why he has these powers, Cole doesn't want anything to do with them. But after meeting a hooded conduit named Kessler, who reveals that a beast is coming and that he is Cole from the future, Cole has a decision. Kessler gave him these powers to prepare for something big that could destroy cities and people, and possibly have conduits rule the world. It's either Cole decides to take down the beast and save humanity, or team up with the beast and become the most powerful conduit to walk the earth.
No. Kessler wanted me strong, ruthless, so that when I faced the beast, I'd be capable of making impossible decisions, all for the common good.
After a successful first game of a potential franchise, Sucker Punch went on to work on the next game. inFAMOUS 2 needed to expand on the set of powers in a way that's not overwhelming or overpowering. They needed to change up the gameplay formula a little bit, as well as clean up the dated visuals. And they did exactly that. Mid-2010 saw the reveal trailer and the first footage of the next game, and it was impressive. Although people weren't really vibing with the hair that Cole had in the trailer. They changed that eventually though. Judging from the trailer, the visuals looked a lot cleaner and a lot less muddy than the first game. The gameplay seems to have faster and more stylish traversal, making chases intense but fun. One thing people heard from the trailer was that Cole sounded different. He sounded a lot younger and less Batman-like.
There's always something.
That's because Eric Layden replaced Jason Cottle, as there were minor complaints about Cole in the first game sounding too much like Batman.
He used his newest and most dangerous power. He went on a one-way trip back in time.
Also, Eric Layden just seems to look an age of Cole. Cole dropped out of college, so he's around 19 or 21 or so. And Eric Layden makes him sound like a dude fresh out of college. Plus Eric Layden just makes Cole sound cooler.
Penal code.
The game was then released in June 7th of 2011 and was really well received. A lot of people might agree with me when I say that Infamous 2 might be the best game in the franchise. It improves and expands on the combat and gives you more ways to approach it. Melee combat was improved by adding the Amp, an electrifying melee weapon that beats the crap out of people with a set of flashy animations. The art direction I feel is also a huge improvement. While the first game was like a live comic book, Infamous 2 is like the MCU. Graphically, this game was a huge step from the previous game. Sucker Punch was finally able to use motion capture in cutscenes, and they look amazing. I mean, the very first cutscene after the comic book inspired intro that the series is known for instantly shows that this game just looks great. Facial animations, Cole's facial details, and the lighting is all a step up. The game now takes place in New Marais, at least after Empire City was destroyed by the Beast, which I'll get into later. New Marais is a fictional city based on New Orleans, and you can definitely see that from a few familiar landmarks to the avant-garde jazz culture. It's by far my favorite in terms of looks and design. Like Empire City before it, New Marais' different districts all have different looks and personality to them. The main city is beautiful and, well, a city. Flood Town is a flooded town, the name speaks for itself, which sees many homes destroyed and abandoned. The place also allows for some fun platforming, which is an instant 10 out of 10 for me. Also, since this place is flooded by water and you have electricity for powers, if you do the math, you can fight enemies in the water too. You also get the industrial district where you can see warehouses and just a bunch of industrial sites. Of course, there's also the swamps. Like, how can you forget about the swamps after playing this game? The thing that I liked about the first two Infamous maps was the variety in landscapes and looks, and the fact that you can explore to almost anything you see in the distance, which is something Infamous Second Son suffered quite a bit of. But now let's talk about the story and characters. I personally think Infamous 2 has the slightly better story. Now while yes, it is a little less complex than the first game, I don't believe that you need a very complex narrative to create the greatest story. But it does come with some notable flaws. Continuing after the events of Infamous, we get to see a nice recap of what happened in that game, given that a lot of people who picked up Infamous 2 haven't played the last game. And this recap is pretty important since you need to know what happens in the first game to fully understand and realize your goal in this game. Even if you have played the first game and know what happens, there are mentions of things that happen off screen, for example, meeting the new character, Lucy Crow. The game then starts with Cole, the main protagonist, Zeke, the sidekick, longtime friend and comical relief, and Crow, the spy, preparing to leave Empire City to head to New Marais, until the Beast arrives and Cole needs to take it down, but he fails and instead the Beast takes down Empire City. Heading to New Marais, Cole and company need to find Dr. Wolf. Finding Wolf, he explains that he's been working on something called the RFI, Rayfield Inhibitor in full, but it requires blast cores. The RFI can not only stop the Beast, but it can kill all living conduits, including Cole. On your journey, you come across a few new characters. Nix, who's a rebellious conduit, as well as Cole's sort of love interest.
I could get me a militia outfit, make you look like a hero.
LaRoche, who's a straight up pervert, and Crow eventually gets powers too.
Ow, damn it!
You also meet Bertrand, who is a smart and honestly pretty likable side villain, who's also a conduit who turns other people into monsters and minions of his own. He himself is a monster with odd weaknesses in boss fights.
If you came to the club just to show love, then what? Then bounce them titties for a nigga.
Other than that, Bertrand is actually the reason why Nix has powers and is so rebellious. But she got her powers at the cost of losing her family and village. Later on you meet John White, who I forgot to mention died in the first game because of the race fear. He, not knowing he was a conduit, rebuilt himself from the ground up, making his character design look so freaking awesome. Anyways, we then find out that John is the Beast. So just before the end game, you're met with the toughest two decisions in the series. Do you team up with the Beast and Quo, taking all the powers you've gained to wreak havoc and become the most powerful conduit, essentially going against Kessler's intentions? Or do you take down the Beast with the help of Nyx, Zeke, the Rebels and the RFI, sacrificing yourself and all conduits with you, going with Kessler's plan and dying a hero, essentially saving humanity? It's up to you to decide, and whatever decision you go with, you will lead to a heartbreaking ending. Infamous 2 was yet another successful Sucker Punch, but the big question was, how were they going to follow up with Infamous 3, if there was going to be an Infamous 3? The only thing that would make sense for the next game was either continue after the evil ending of Infamous 2 or reboot the franchise. Now yes, of course there were hints and conspiracies that Cole was still alive following the good ending, but Sucker Punch instead went a different route. Instead of following the evil ending, reviving Cole, or rebooting the series, Sucker Punch decided to just continue the story with a completely new cast of characters and set of powers. Powers, you ask? Well, forget what was said and done in Infamous 2 about the RFI being able to basically kill all conduits across the world. Because according to Sucker Punch, the RFI didn't properly do its job. Now they tried to explain this in a DLC titled Cole's Legacy, but it isn't properly explained in there either. Forget Cole sacrificing himself to save humanity and end all conduits, because in Seattle, Washington, there are still conduits roaming around. In early 2013, a trailer was revealed. In this trailer shows a group of military soldiers getting wiped, along with their APC unit, by a mysterious figure with powers. Now the tone might fool you to think this is potentially a Prototype 3 or some new IP, until it is revealed to be an Infamous game, with the subtitles Second Son. Not even Infamous 3, but Second Son. Now that subtitle might be referring to the first sons from the very first game, but the final game doesn't seem to have much to do with them. There was some minor skepticism from hardcore fans, but it was the E3 trailer from later that year that had people talking, and genuinely this was exciting. I remember my dad showing me the trailer for the first time. I'm not gonna lie, I was really excited. I was excited for the fact that we'd be seeing a new Infamous game, and this new character seemed like an interesting change of pace from the often very serious Cole McGrath. Also, one other thing that piqued my interest was, of course, the new powers. No longer do we have an electrifying protagonist, but instead a smoky and rebellious character. March of 2014 finally saw the release of Second Son exclusive to the PS4. And let's just admit, it's the best selling game in the franchise, because it genuinely is. It even broke new grounds for the series, selling over 1 million copies in 9 days. Bravo! Second Son was also pretty well received, although slightly less favorable than the first/previous two games, scoring an 8.7 from IGN, a 7 from Eurogamer, and an 80 from Metacritic. Personally, and a lot of die-hard fans of the series might agree when I say that Second Son is the worst game in the series, for many reasons. First off, I want to say this game was clearly rushed. The story is often very simple, characters aren't as fleshed out, powers aren't as fleshed out, the world of Seattle is kind of boring to traverse, and is essentially a background for traversal than an actual place to really immerse yourself in. Essentially, the only thing that got a major improvement from Infamous 2 was the visuals and, well, traversal. Graphically, Second Son is a really great looking game. The powers are a really good example of this. Delson's smoke powers look mind-blowing, artistically and technically. Neon, although not perfect, can be hypnotizing to look at, especially when traversing at high speeds. Video looks flashy and bears the most resemblance to Cole's electricity powers from the first two games. The lighting is also a huge step up, although not all that perfect. Sometimes the lighting can be too bright or way too dark, especially during the daytime. Using neon during the day can be blinding. Certain camera angles, while realistic to an actual camera, can make the game look really dark, resulting in only being able to sometimes only see silhouettes. Second Son has some of the fastest traversal in the series, with Neon and Video seeing you speed around the map. They all look flashy in their own right. Everything besides the visuals and the traversal is pretty much a step down. In fact, the more you restart the game from over, the more it kind of falls apart and shows its weaknesses. For example, my first playthrough while playing in Good Karma, I thoroughly enjoyed the game. The second playthrough while playing in Evil Karma, the game kind of started to lose its magic for me. I just started noticing so many things in both the story and content that could have been done so much better given more time. Dawson Rowe as a character is my first issue. Now while I don't want to sound like a Cole stan, Dawson just wasn't doing it for me. Dawson as a character doesn't change, develop or learn much outside of his powers. Another thing is his background and who he is. Other than Dawson being a rebellious spray painter and vandalizer who likes to crack up humorous jokes frequently, we know nothing about Dawson. And you can tell the story and characters are rushed when in the beginning of the game, Dawson's brother, Reggie, mentions their parents once and never again.
Huh? You think this would make our parents proud? Misdemeanor vandalism?
It is never expanded upon, never talked about, no hints, nothing. We know nothing about Dawson's backstory, which is odd because throughout the game you learn about the backgrounds of other conduits you encounter via the now iconic comic book inspired cutscenes. But through these we don't get to learn about Dawson. In fact, the two people we actually know quite a bit about in the entire game is Abigail Fetch Walker and Book Augustine. Fetch ran away from her home with her brother after her parents found out she had powers. Living homeless, she and her brother, Brent, became addicted to drugs after meeting some dealers. Fetch accidentally murders her brother under the influence of a psychedelic drug. She's now on a revenge spree to murder drug dealers and get drugged off the street. Brooke Augustine, who I like to call the female Bertrand, is the founder of the DUP organization, as well as a conduit herself. Her goal is to lock away conduits where they're safe, by locking them up in Curtin K Station, a prison far outside the city. There's a lot more to her than that, but unfortunately I don't have enough time to go through her entire biography. Let's talk about the story for Second Son though. After trying to escape, but eventually getting caught by Dawson's brother, Reggie, a truck comes crashing and then turns over, with some prisoners escaping the scene. Dawson encounters a prisoner and gets powers from the prisoner after intercepting him. Dawson later runs into Augustine, who shortly finds out he's a conduit. She then supposedly attacks his village for some odd reason, and then the whole point of the game is to get concrete powers to get concrete out of an old lady's legs. But on the way through the story, you meet characters that don't really get enough screen time, and a karma system that doesn't work for this game's narrative. For example, Second Son's evil ending. The evil ending goes against the entire point of the story. You have concrete powers and are able to save your tribe, but instead you're kicked out of your tribe for being some type of psycho conduit, and then you kill them all. The end. What? I do have to admit, the acting and tone in the scene is almost top notch, but it's easily overshadowed by the fact that this ending despises everything you've done throughout the game and calls it a day. Dude. Side content in Second Son is also very repetitive compared to the previous games. Now while Infamous and Infamous 2 didn't have the best side missions, they were at least fun and had a lot more variety, and also fleshed out the citizens of a particular city district and the city itself. I think the reason why Infamous Second Son is kind of a step down is because Sucker Punch were rushed to get the game out as soon as possible as a sort of release game for the PS4. Which is a shame because Infamous Second Son could have been a great Infamous game, but its problems start to overshadow it every time I play.
Half as long.
Twice as bright.
And that concludes the remake of the Rise and Fall of Infamous, celebrating the 1 year anniversary of the video that started it all for me. If you enjoyed this video, it is much appreciated if you leave a like on the video and subscribe for more video essays. I'm currently working on a script for Splitgate, hoping to finish that soon. So stay safe, stay entertained, take care and take it easy. Cheers.
I could already hear people starting to party, just celebrating being alive. I thought my friend was gonna go down as an unsung hero, but here in New Marais, they knew what he had done for them. Who'd have guessed that the demon of Empire City would become the patron saint of New Marais? I wanted to say goodbye to him alone. He had been my best friend, and now he was gone. Sometimes I hear folks talking about conduits and humans like they're totally different. That's bullshit. Because there ain't nobody with more humanity than Cole McGrath. I love you, brother. And I'm sure gonna miss you.